Mixed with Listerman.
Do you believe that what you don't know won't hurt you? And now take a look at this, all right? Here is former matinee idol Rock Hudson. Why is the woman with him upset? Maybe because something he didn't tell her, huh? Kind of hurt her? That's Hollywood, gang. This is reality. Mark Christian, Rock Hudson's lover, is awarded $21 million in damages because Hudson doesn't reveal he's got AIDS. And that this is putting Christian's life in danger. Tonight, we decide, you, us, all right, when an individual's rights to know is greater than a person's rights to conceal a deep, dark secret. Do you have the right to know if your husband has AIDS or if your neighbor is plotting to kill you? We're going between a rock and a hard place tonight, all right, with secrets that kill. Next on the Morton Downey Jr. Show. Stay with us. Let me introduce the players we've got with us so far in this inning, all right? Rich Astorino is a very prominent attorney from the Eastern Seaboard. He's with us along with John Anastasio, who's a criminal defense attorney, one of my favorite kind of attorneys. And loudmouth number one over here, we have Dr. H. Edward Rowe, president of the National AIDS Prevention Institute. Rich, let me start with you, pal. Are you appalled, as I think a lot of folks are, that Rock Hudson basically tried to commit murder when he failed to reveal he had AIDS to his lover?
No question, Mort. Rock Hudson's dead, of course, so we can't put him in jail. But if he were alive, I would advocate that he be sanctioned criminally, not just civilly, but also criminally, that he be put in jail.
Let me take that a step further, all right? His secretary, his personal secretary and assistant is alive, knew about it, and conspired with Hudson not to do anything. Would he then be guilty of a conspiracy or as an accomplice before the fact?
Well, I think so. I mean, he certainly has a lesser degree of liability, so perhaps a jail term would be warranted, but certainly not as long as that for Rock Hudson.
All right, John Anastasio is one of the leading criminal defense attorneys. Let me ask you, John, as a criminal attorney, which is, of course, one of my least favorite occupations, do you agree that a person with any dangerous sexually transmitted disease has a legal and a moral obligation to disclose their illness to any sexual partners?
He's got a moral obligation. He doesn't have a legal obligation.
Why?
Well, it's a practical matter. Look at your picture of Rock Hudson there. I mean, now, Mr. Christian, the guy's losing weight. What's he, 98 pounds? Oh, Rock's on a diet. That's why he looks. I mean, he had to know something was wrong.
How does he have to know what it is that's wrong? I mean, the guy could be suffering from any number of diseases. Cancer, all right, where he loses weight. Cancer is not a transmittal disease. You can just croak from cancer, baby.
Well, given the activities that they were doing, I mean, and it wasn't just with Rock. Perhaps it was with somebody else. But, you know, when you bend over, perhaps you got to pay the price. In fact, Mort...
Oh, wait a second. Let's not just make this gay sex, all right? Let's make it that you're a bisexual. You got AIDS and you're married, all right? You're supposed to tell your wife, she bends over too, pal, or doesn't yours do that?
If you recall a few months back, when we had the herpes case on here, where that woman got it from the doctor, I took the same position. You've got an obligation...
But we're talking about one that is a death-dealing disease and another that's going to give you a little boil once in a while, you know.
There's no difference.
Plenty of difference, pal. Ask a guy who has herpes if he feels he's going to die. Ask a guy who has AIDS if he feels he's going to die.
Then you
Puts a
restrain
time bomb
yourself.
in you don't want to see him punished. That time bomb is ticking away inside you, and you don't want to see him punished. Let him walk because you went in it with your eyes open. That's ridiculous. You're
Well, maybe you don't
distinguishing...
behave in that activity, or you're more careful.
You're the guy who says, death by auto is okay as long as you're driving a red car. If it's a blue car, punish him. You can't distinguish, John.
There's a great bit of difference between death by auto and getting AIDS from somebody.
AIDS is much worse. You're talking about comparative negligence. Sure, maybe the victim should have known. Maybe we reduced the damage from 21 million to 19 million. But give him nothing? No. Let the criminal walk free? No. Absolutely
Well,
not.
I'll tell you, you're talking about comparative negligence. We're talking about it actually occurred. My understanding of the case, Mort, this is just on infliction of mental distress, his worry. We don't know if he has AIDS yet.
Now, we know he doesn't have AIDS yet, all right? He has not been diagnosed as HIV positive yet.
Well, he knows what he does. He's obviously hasn't kept it in his pants only for rock. I'm sure he's been around. Yeah, it's a risk.
Hey, pal,
if you're going to
here's the problem. Here's the problem. You're just talking about the homosexual lover.
No, I'm
How
not.
about the needle user? How about the guy whose innocent wife is sitting home while he's coming home with a d***er, all right, that's going to hand her something?
Well, what do you suggest that the wife do with the husband?
What do I suggest you do with the husband? If he's got it, cut it off, baby. Don't have anything to do with it. Let me go to Dr. Rowe. Let me go to you. Dr.
Now,
Rowe.
Mort, I agree with you on that,
Dr.
but it
Rowe,
has
zip
nothing to
it,
do with
zip
the
it.
law.
I'll be back to your mouth,
Zip
all
it
right?
or can it?
Zip it. What is that, Velcro you got on your face? Dr. Rowe, as a nationally recognized AIDS expert, you've come in some cases to call sexual activity lethal activity. What do you think of Mr. Anastasio's position that what you don't know won't hurt you?
Well, I think we have to decide whether we want to have civilized society or revert to the jungle. The basis of civilized society is moral conduct, and that means stopping short of doing detriment to other people. And that means also not only doing detriment to other people, but warning other people when someone else may do detriment to them. For example, if I knew that somebody had put a bomb in your office with a timer on it, but I didn't know when the blooming thing was going to go off and blow you all over the walls, if I refused to tell you about that situation, do I have any responsibility?
Any culpability
do I
at
have
all?
your blood on my hands when you end up on the walls?
Well, of course, my answer would be yes. I don't know what Mr. Anastasio thinks.
John, what's the justification for withholding the information? That you can't get partners. If I tell you I have AIDS and I can't get partners, that's the only reason. Purely selfish and sexual. That you want to have fun. That's the only reason not to tell.
They have an obligation, a moral obligation to tell somebody. But as far as getting the law involved with people's own sexual activity, we don't need the government.
Where do we say the law?
involved.
Wait a second. Where do we say the law? I'm not saying the law. I'm not saying the law here. I'm saying that if you have AIDS, and I'm your wife, man, and you take care of me some night, and I find out you got AIDS, I don't have to call the law. I just have to tell you and my lawyer what you've done and sue your butt off, all right? And then I should collect, shouldn't I?
No.
I shouldn't.
You should be able to maybe cut it off, as you suggest, but not sue them.
Oh.
It doesn't belong in court.
Oh, man, where is your logic?
More,
What do you mean it doesn't belong in court? I bet you've had all kinds of garbage in court. If Rock Hudson attempted murder, all right, we'll hear about a serial killer of historic proportions. Stay with us. All right, let me come back up here on home base with Dr. Rowe. Doc, you're aware of a case that can be described as nothing less than an AIDS horror story. Now, would you do me a favor and tell us how one man kept his disease confidential and may have wrecked the lives of literally 1,000 people?
Yes, this was a young fellow in his 20s. He was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS by a member of my scientific advisory board. And he was somewhat shattered
So he knew that the average time for him to go would probably be 18 months.
Yeah, and right away he began lashing out. He turned to the doctor, a 32-year-old physician, Jim is his name. He said, doctor, he said, I want you to know one thing. He said, I'm going out of here, and I'm going to have sex with everything in sight. I'm bisexual, and I'm going to do it with everybody I can. Well, 15 months later, he came back, and he told the doctor he had had sex with almost 1,000 males and females in that interim period. And so, you know, this raises some questions.
Did the dirty SOB die?
Yeah, who's going to stop the
Did
guy?
he die, I hope?
Yeah, well, you know, I don't know where he is now. I would assume so, because this goes back about 3.5 years. So I would assume so, because the average life beyond diagnosis is about 2 years for the...
So what's the solution? You put a tattoo on him?
Well, let me
and
ask you, John. Let me ask you, would you be willing to defend this guy and his right to confidentiality?
That doctor would have gone to jail if he'd reported it.
Would you have been willing to defend him?
Yes.
Would you have defended that scaggy, scabby-faced bum? All right?
What did he do wrong? What law did he violate?
What?
What civil law did he violate?
I say he committed attempted murder.
He admitted he was spreading the seeds of death all over the horizon, didn't he? Because isn't the AIDS virus the seeds of death? Doesn't it kill people?
Well, wouldn't you say in that case with that behavior that perhaps the man's insane?
Well, whether he's
good.
insane
Is that
or
any
not...
different
Good,
than
let's
some
lock him in a rubber
Should he be
room.
Of course, there's
reported?
nothing up here.
Should he be restrained? Florida, this happened in the state of Florida, which restrains prostitutes from going out and peddling their wares after they're diagnosed. You know, why shouldn't this guy have been restrained?
Well, how are we going to restrain him? Tattoo I have AIDS on
Okay.
his chest?
Put him in quarantine. Isolate him
First-
physically.
So we're going to put him in
I think,
concentration
I
camp.
think,
Rick?
wait a second. I think when you have a situation where a guy is an obvious danger to the community, as you say, and to himself, all right, that what he's saying is, in that case, I'm not saying everyone who has AIDS gets quarantined. That's ridiculous. But if someone is an obvious danger to the community, to themselves, as this guy was when he says to the doctors, I'm going out and nail everything, baby. I'm going to get it both male and female. That guy should be taken out of operation within society. Yes, you
How
quarantine.
are you going to determine who's a danger?
The doctor's report. And I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something. You go by the doctor's report. Give the doctor the chance. If you got AIDS, you go to Alcatraz or something. Give a special island for the people to know. What happens if your old lady went out, she fell in love with a guy, came home, got AIDS, she was knocked up, the kid has AIDS and everything else, she got to play. It's not enough, I think, to pay for the foreigners. We got AIDS, herpes, all these goddamn diseases, and where do they get them? From the foreign countries.
So that's a
And
threat.
it's so now.
So that's a threat.
It's all about rednecks. You see the crap? They're taking over the world. How do you know they didn't give a How do you know Castro, when he sent them over, he took them over?
All right,
Okay,
let's
and
get
the,
going.
and the Japanese
Let's
were a threat,
proceed.
and we stuck them in concentration camps, and the Jews were a threat to
If
Hitler.
they're-
Let's stick them in concentration camps. Stick the AIDS victims
They're
in
gonna
concentration
die, they're
camps.
gonna die. Would you want to die, Dave?
Okay, let's get back on to the thrust of the show, all right? Let's get back on the thrust show. Yeah, the thrust of the, I don't like the word thrust in this particular one, all right? The point is, go ahead, grab a seat. We'll be back with you when the loudmouth's over. All right, good. The point is, when you have someone who is obviously a threat to themselves or society, the courts have the right, as do doctors, to recommend that they be quarantined or that they be incarcerated in a mental institution.
Again, wins. The question is,
The
who's
doctor
gonna
knew.
decide?
That doctor should have been able to decide.
was not
Had he
allowed to
opened his
report it.
mouth, he would have broken some ethical garbage that doctors don't have anyhow. You know,
Legal.
And
I
maybe
think priests, doctors, and lawyers, when a client or a parishioner or a patient can injure another patient physically, have an obligation to let at least that other patient know, or at least authorities know, who can prevent that from happening.
So
How
we have
about-
to register with tattoo
How-
marks on the forearms.
No
all
one's
of the
got
AIDS
tattoo marks, bird brain.
Hey,
Then how do we know?
Rich,
Mark?
let me ask you. Let me ask Rich. Rich, do you think that the Rock Hudson message is going to be sending a very big message to all those who carry dangerous communicable diseases, that they better speak before they unzip it?
Absolutely, Mort. It's a very unique case because, of course, Rock Hudson was rich and famous, and it's one of the first cases. I mean, $20 million is a huge award, and I don't think we're going to see awards of that size.
Think that'll be overturned?
I think ultimately it will be cut down.
Yeah, cut down to maybe $3 or $4 million.
That's a lot of money. I think $3-4 million's more in the area.
All right, Doctor, go ahead.
Can I inject just a little bit of arithmetic? If one person who is infected transmits to one person within a 12-month period, and if that happens on the average, that extends out to 65,000 people infected as a result of one infection the 16th year. Just run the arithmetic. I sat down and did it yesterday on a little calculator.
A lot of people getting sick and getting ready to die, and a lot of money out of their pocket to try and take care of those people, because they'll end up being the only ones who have hospital beds in the very near future.
You ask any epidemiologist, is it likely that an infected person who is promiscuous is going to infect at least one additional person in the run of a 12-month period? Oh, yes, of course it's likely. You know, it's already happening.
But, Doctor, aren't there high-risk groups so that you can cut, you know, intravenous needle users, you know, homosexuals? These are the type of people you find out before you sleep with somebody, and that cuts down to a large extent.
You can't always find out, especially if they keep it secret from you. If you have, we got a lawyer here, we got a whole raft of legal cases. You know, according to the Code of Military Conduct, you know what aggravated assault is? It's imposing the risk of death or grievous bodily damage on another human being.
But we're not in the Army.
Military.
That fits right in. There's
Is that
precedent for
civil?
this, John. This
Civil.
is nothing new.
All right, confidentiality on the couch. Let's find out about that. Should your shrink be the only one who knows your problem? Come on back. Joining us at loudmouth number 2 in this segment is Dennis Clark, Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Dennis has been a guest on this program before, so knows what to expect. Also a return guest is Dr. Ari Keefe. And Dr. Keefe, let me start with you, sir. A recent court decision, which sent electric shockwaves throughout the psychiatric community, stated that it's the responsibility of the psychiatrist to notify victims when a patient says he is going to do harm to them, all right? Even though the patient has said these things during confidential discussions in the doctor's office. I can't understand why any psychiatrist wouldn't applaud the prevention of crime.
I think psychiatrists certainly do. I think this is a Tarasov decision, 1976. The critical thing is that the psychiatrist has a duty to warn potential victims or to take appropriate measures to ensure the safety of the victim, which can be hospitalizing the patient.
Okay, so you then would applaud that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's go further.
Who decides that? Who decides when they're going to breach that curtain? And how many people are going to not consult with a psychiatrist or a psychologist and then go out and do something because they don't have
Just because we can save a life, we shouldn't?
No. You see...
Yeah, well, maybe you're going to deter a lot of people that are going to go out, and in the end, we're going to land up with a lot more dead bodies on the streets, because instead of sitting and talking to somebody, like a psychiatrist or other healthcare professional, they're going to want to stick an axe or a knife in somebody.
Yeah, well, the issue, you're missing the point.
There's a study going on in Florida right now, in the Tampa-St. Petersburg area, where the psychiatrists are running an experiment on the children of those cities by putting 100 child molesters back out on the streets to find out whether psychotherapy or behavior modification works better on these people who rape children. And the way they're going to find out whether or not one or the other works better is by giving them a confidentiality step from the federal government without warning anyone in the city. They're going to count it up. Which group rapes and mutilates more children?
Boy, that's how the hell our money's being spent, right?
$832,000. And who are going to be the victims? The kids of Tampa-St. Petersburg. We got a case here in California.
Well, no,
Same thing.
see,
5-year-old
wait a second,
child
Dennis.
raped
Wait a
and
second,
killed.
Dennis. Let me hear what Dr. Keefe said.
traditionally, psychiatrists have had a responsibility where an individual threaten somebody where somebody was suicidal or homicidal to ensure that that person was certified, hospitalized, and so forth. The Tarasoff decision extended the duty to warn potential victims. Absolutely a sensible idea.
Well, but
now,
here they're going
here
they're going against that.
Causing the problem.
The problem for psychiatry arises when, not when you're faced with an individual who is about to commit the crime, but where an individual talks about murdering somebody, is treated, is then well, and now goes back out into the community, is rehabilitated, and 6 months later commits a crime which could not have been predicted.
On the drug that the psychiatrist gave him, Lori Dan.
No, could not have been predicted.
Manufactured by Ciba Geigy, a drug which in the package insert warning, an experimental drug, is known to produce violent outbursts and psychosis. And she killed a bunch of kids there in Chicago because of that psychiatric drug.
Who prescribed it for her?
A psychiatrist, and it was illegal for him to do so, and she's dead, and he should be on trial for the murder of those children.
And that's criminal according to the doctor. You don't have to extend it to releasing that information. That's just not prescribing drugs properly.
You've got to draw the distinction between the ability to predict the individual who is about to do it, the man in front of you who says, I'm about to do something.
All right, but doctor, is it your feeling that you and other shrinks can help treat potentially violent individuals?
Absolutely. Absolutely, but
there are only two things that psychiatrists protect.
Now, this guy is always opposed to psychiatry.
It's their pocketbook and the rifle.
And he doesn't really illustrate it. You certainly can treat people who are potentially violent, but there are a percentage of people for whom you cannot predict. And the law is such, and the Tarasoff decision has been extended throughout many states.
Okay, give me the law.
Well, the law is that in some states now, psychiatrists have been held liable where bystanders were injured. Psychiatrists have been held liable 6 to 8 months after the individual had been discharged from treatment. The question is, to what extent, and this is what the lawyer is saying, to what extent can you be held liable when lawyers aren't held liable, judges aren't held liable, parole officers aren't, wardens aren't? So
hold them all liable. Hold them all liable.
It's a case-by-case situation. I take the case.
But you know what you guys do? You guys use us as lab animals.
No,
you're using us as lab animals.
Let's take an actual
draw
case.
the line in more. Who's going to make the decision, and at what point do we decide that a psychiatrist, after
well,
he
you've
peeks
already
into
answered
your
who
mind,
makes the
can get in?
decision. You've already answered who makes the decision. The psychiatrist has to make the decision. If we can give him the right to make the decision not to make a decision, then we can give him the right to make the decision and to make damn well sure that that person doesn't go back out into the population.
That's faulty logic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just because if you have a given, if you have
a very straight line.
No, it doesn't.
If
you have a given and there's simply a rule of confidentiality, there's no decision that has to be
There
made.
should be no rule of confidentiality where another person can suffer bodily injury.
And how do you determine when they might suffer bodily injury?
Like that decides. A doctor like him should decide. Wait, someone who is a trained individual should decide and have the responsibility. You don't want the responsibility.
Wait a second. Listen to me. Under the common law, psychiatrists didn't have the responsibility, the confidentiality.
Under my common law, psychiatrists shouldn't exist.
No, but the confidentiality is only a recent kind of thing. And in those instances where the individual is potentially harmful, the confidentiality does not have to be held. It is not a sacred privilege. You do not have to keep the patient confident.
So you don't have to keep it.
No, you do not have to keep the confidence when it's in the interest of the public.
Confidentiality
you don't have to keep the
confidence. Psychiatrist because of what he's doing. I've got a case here, the Thompson
you're missing
case
the point.
in California.
You're missing the point.
Let the guy loose
So
on
are
a
lawyers.
weekend pass.
So are lawyers, pal.
He
And they
goes
send
out
criminals
and he
back into
rapes
the
and kills a
population to
5-year-old
create other
boy.
victims all
No,
the time.
judges send them back. Boy, I got a case I'll give you right now. It's a situation, criminal case, involved a child molester. How he got charged was he realized he had a problem. He turned himself in for help. And instead of help immediately, he got indicted and locked up instead of getting the treatment. Now, when a man recognizes that he's got a problem up there, you don't go lock his ass up in jail. You treat him.
You lock him up and you treat him while he's locked up, so he can't get out and bite again. Let me ask John a question. I mentioned earlier my dislike for defense attorneys, all right? I think you guys belong on the same show as psychiatrists. So you probably...
Thank you, Mort.
You probably defend the right of Dr. Keeve, all right, to sit quietly by while one of his patients makes good on a promise to use his AK-47 on some kids in a schoolyard? Huh? What do you think of that? You defend his right to do that?
Defend his right
Would you
to do
defend
that?
his right to maintain the confidentiality of a patient who came in and said, Doctor, I have an AK-47, as we know happened recently, and I'm going to use it on some kids in a schoolyard. Should he keep that confidential?
How do you know he's only blowing off steam? And you're
How
going to
the
get
hell do
another...
you know he isn't only blowing off?
You don't.
So do you take a chance on a bunch of kids dying? Are you that kind of scum?
Well, no.
You'd see kids die for it?
Well,
More.
first, according to you, I am. Second,
Yeah, but before...
chance. You're talking about chances as opposed
I'm
to
talking
the
about
deterrent
chances.
effect.
I'd rather have a chance that it wouldn't happen than a chance that it would. And it won't happen if you lock that bubble brain up in a rubber room.
And now, a dozen of those other bubble brains don't go in and try and get treatment, and you've got a dozen cases like that.
So you got a dozen cases that did it,
So we've got
but
more
you got
dead
one
kids.
that you saved that didn't.
Oh, so we saved one and we
Come
got a
on.
dozen killed.
You talk about logic, man. Where'd you get your law degree? From a paper factory? Look at this right here. Look at this.
It happens to be a crime to threaten to kill someone, and if a psychiatrist is going to protect them, they ought to be held not only civilly responsible, but criminally responsible as co-conspirators in the crime. I've got a case here for you. Let's take a case.
Here's his case.
This is the
Let's
law.
take his case,
Here's
Dr. Keefe.
Okay,
The Thompson case in California, the Supreme Court ruled the psychiatrist didn't have to warn. This is a case where the psych was letting this guy out on weekend passes. He went out and raped and murdered a 5-year-old child. The Supreme Court, that great Supreme Court in California, said that everyone has to share in the risks equally. You know what they found out afterwards? The psych was having sex with a guy on weekends, and that's why he was letting him out. Now, he should have been put in jail along with him.
Well, that has
I agree with
Dr. Keefe,
I agree with him 100%. You see, but just because there's one rotten apple in the barrel, or 10 or 20, it doesn't mean you can indict the whole profession, which this gentleman keeps doing, and he keeps missing the point.
Hey, they've been in there long
Supreme
enough,
Court-
the barrel is rotten.
No, the Supreme Court obviously recognizes the complexity of the issue.
I'm sure that was the Rosebird Supreme Court. I'll bet you it was.
Absolutely.
Guaranteed. Knew it, didn't have to ask. Remember last week when you confessed your sins in church, huh? You went to the priest. Well, the whole congregation knows what the hell you told them. Stay by. Dennis, let me go to Dennis. Let me go to Dennis Clark, please, who's with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Dennis, if one of Dr. Keeve's patients acts out a murder, all right, that they've discussed in therapy, how should our courts deal then with Dr. Keeve if he hasn't made any report on that?
As a co-conspirator to murder, and he should be held on the same charges as his accomplice, which is the guy that pulled the trigger or splashed or however he did the killing. The psychiatrist, confidentiality for the psychiatrist is not to protect the patient, it's to protect the psychiatrist, and that's the only reason they have it.
Well, someone should have some responsibility someday for protecting society, all right?
Absolutely.
We're always interested in the criminal and in the potential nutcake, right?
Well,
this guy wouldn't put anyone in jail. I bet you used to be a prosecutor, were you? Were you?
No more.
You're the
Well,
only,
I can't. Special
you're the only
prosecutor.
defense attorney I
I've
know
been a
that-
special
who I
prosecutor.
didn't switch and do the flip-flop.
Mort, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights.
Confidentiality belongs to the patient. The psychiatrist has the responsibility to keep in confidence what the patient tells him for the benefit of the patient's treatment. However, if the patient tells the psychiatrist something which may be potentially harmful to others, then he has a responsibility greater than the confidentiality.
Okay, I agree. Let me
But
go
you
to
see, this is a
Joanna. Let me go
crime.
to
It's
Joanna,
not
Dennis.
mental illness.
Let me go to Joanna here. You recently counseled a man, I guess, our client,
A long time ago.
all right, who not only acted violently, but discussed violent fantasies. What did this person say to you, and how did you react?
This was a very troubled young man whose normal behavior was a lot milder than that of many of the young men sitting out in the audience.
Why? Let me ask you, you have psychoanalyzed all these people since you've been here?
No.
This, of course, is the
just
ability
comment.
of psychiatrists,
Just
right?
comment. No,
You made a
no.
generalization statement, though.
No, I
that
said
he was as normal or more normal
his general behavior was
Uh-huh.
quieter and milder.
than these people.
But yes.
You were
but
with
he,
them 24 hours, so you knew that.
No, then they are today.
Okay.
But he was a very troubled young man. He could not express his feelings except in fantasies of violence. He came in and he said, I think I'm going to go down to the docks and pick up one of those streetwalkers and stab her and cut her up and throw her into the river. Now, the question comes into judgment. We are not infallible. Human beings are not infallible. Psychotherapy is more of an art than it is a science.
I
And
agree.
it depends on
So what'd you
superbly.
do?
Understatement
What'd you
of the
do?
universe there. Got nothing to do with science.
Let me hear what Joanna did in this situation.
In my judgment, this was bravado, braggadocio, the fantasy of a young man who is expressing tremendous rage at the people in his life to whom he could not state that rage directly.
So you did nothing?
I did nothing, and he did not kill anyone.
He did not kill anyone?
Yes.
Okay. Then let me come to Pastor Parker. Pastor Parker, you're here to represent the highest law of all, which happens to be God's law, I think. Are you betraying God when you disclose information confessed to you under an oath?
Absolutely not. You're not betraying God. What we're dealing with here is that there is the law of the land. The Bible, the scriptures say that we need to obey the laws of the land. Now, if somebody comes to me and they confess that they've committed a crime against somebody, and it's been done already, my responsibility to them and to God and to the society that I live in, my civil right, would be to first lead that person to forgiveness from God, which is available if a person, the scriptures say,
tell me what you're
if
gonna
they
do.
repent, if they turn to God and ask God to forgive
So
them,
if they turn to God and ask God to forgive them, you don't
then
do
the
anything
second
further.
part is that they need to forsake their sin. To forsake their sin means that they need to confess it and forsake it, which would include going to the civil
All right, but now the
authorities
religion
and
I'm
confessing
from,
their
I'm a
sin.
Roman Catholic, all right?
Right.
A priest is not allowed to reveal any of the sins he hears in a confessional. Now, as a Roman Catholic, I've got to tell you, that is fine. I feel very comfortable with it. However, I also believe that any time a priest hears a sin that may bring about bodily damage to another person, he also has an obligation to do something about that.
And what about his oath, Mort?
Any response on that, John?
What about his oath? When you walk into that confessional, none of it's supposed to escape those four walls. And he's taken an oath to that effect.
I don't give a damn about an oath. I don't give a damn about an oath to a bunch of stone, to St. Peter's Basilica, to the Pope, to anyone else. You have an oath to your human race, and that is to protect them. And that's your main oath to God before anyone else. No, they didn't. They took an oath to a bishop, to a monsignor, to a cardinal, and to a pope. You take an oath to God by protecting the rest of his creatures. The rest of his creatures are more important than any hierarchy in any church.
Then not only are you having him break his oath, but you're turning preachers into liars. Because first they say nothing's going to go outside of these four walls, and then they turn around and turn you in.
Absolutely,
Why don't we-
baby.
Why don't we ordain?
Doesn't say, bless me, Father, I am about to sin. I've got something that I wanted to do for a long time, and I think it's about time I did it.
Look, I
doesn't protect
agree
that.
in that sense, Dennis. I agree with John in that sense. If a guy walks in and says, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, I just murdered someone, I am sorry, blah, 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 the priest can give absolution or retain it, whichever he wants to.
protected in his
However, if
confidentiality by
someone's
the
walking in and saying, I'm going to kill Mary Smith on Oak Street, that priest has a responsibility to his fellow human beings to
Now
report it.
there, I would agree, because it hasn't occurred yet. If you're confessing only your sins, you can't just contemplate
Then
a
you
sin.
don't know much about the Catholic religion, do you? There are three things necessary to create a mortal sin, all right? He's already committed two of them. He's got a mortal sin, pal. If you have the desire to nail that woman tonight, and you think about it and you're married, you committed a sin. We've heard from God's people, all right? Now let's go hear from God's real people, these folks out here. Let me start with Ray. Ray, you're an atheist. Therefore, I assume you have no respect for the confidentiality at all of a priest and his parishioner as repentant.
Right. I think he shouldn't be treated any different than any other well. Social workers have an obligation to turn in suspected cases of child abusers. I don't think they should have any immunity because they're priests. If they,
all right.
You know,
let's go with the audience.
Let's go with the audience.
You guys, you've heard this.
Yeah.
You've heard all the garbage so
What
far.
I wanted to address was to the lawyer, John Anastasia.
Go ahead.
One of the first things that, the first concept that you learn in law school or in pre-law school or in any pre-law class is the duty of care. If I'm making a possibly toxic chemical, I owe society the duty of care to test that out properly. It's a commitment that I have on society. Don't you think these psychiatrists that are withholding this information owe people the same duty of care?
No, because with toxic wastes, you don't have a duty of care. You have to be concerned about its strict liability. You have a dangerous substance. So there may be some labeling conditions.
Ritalin's a dangerous substance. It's making kids into murderers. 46% of the kids raised on Ritalin will be charged with at least one felony by the age of 18. And that's what psychiatry
Let me ask
is
you
doing to
something,
this
Dennis.
country.
What percentage of the kids not raised on Ritalin will be charged with a felony?
It's 20 times higher for the hyperactive kids raised on Ritalin because Ritalin makes children psychotic and suicidal.
Then that's a product's liability case.
That's a whole different issue than the
That's
issue.
a product
let me get to John just a second.
Company.
Let me get to John.
And the
Wait a
psychiatrist
second, Dennis.
who failed the law.
Okay, guys, zip it. Zip it! Let's get to the reality here. Let's get to reality here. Dennis, this gentleman just asked a question about a dangerous chemical, a toxic chemical, and it could explode, or blah, 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 blah. The duty to warn. Okay, the duty to warn. Yeah. Now, you said that's a chemical versus a human. Am I correct?
There's a higher standard with those types of chemicals.
How much is your body worth chemically?
I think it's about 96 cents or something like that.
And what is your body composed of? Is it all chemicals?
Mostly water.
So if you want to start using your logic, we'll just say that you're a chemical too, and if you're a dangerous chemical. Right?
Lord, all I want to say is I'm a Roman Catholic also, okay? And I believe in what you said, that if a priest knows something through a confessional that a homicide or heinous crime
Will
commit,
take place.
Right, or will take place, correct. I believe he should, moral obligation, if anything,
Absolutely.
tell the authorities.
To the rest of the parishioners.
Okay, so
Yes.
I think more it's fair to say that in the case of the priest or the case of the psychiatrist, in most instances, it's possible to persuade the individual to turn himself in, to seek help, and so forth.
Yeah, but
we're talking about this very small percentage.
Well, let's take care of the very small
okay.
part, all right? And then the big part obviously takes care of itself.
When you're dealing with this area, there's clearly that the law states the psychiatrist has a duty to warn or a duty to protect.
Sir, go ahead.
No
I want to hear
question
the
about it.
audience.
If Charles Manson came up here and said, hey, I'm going to go out and kill all these people, that's the same thing as letting a person out with AIDS that's going to do the same thing and kill everybody else.
Absolutely. Correct. That's correct.
No question about it.
Morty.
Please let me hear from the audience.
Thank you, Morty. Getting back to the real issue, which was AIDS tonight. In New York City, they're talking about banning lethal weapons. It is my belief, if you carry a lethal weapon in your pants, and you take out that weapon and you use that on somebody, and you knowingly cause a loss of their life, you should be made to pay. Change the laws of the country.
You know, Mort, there's a solution. You can wear body armor if you've got to worry about the guns. As a lot of police officers wear body armor for guns, well, there's a solution right here. Solution right here when you've got to worry about people.
How about Mark?
Self-control.
That first of all, that first of all is 70% effective, all right? And sir, let me tell you, 4 of those 4 of those is really wishful thinking on your part. More. Let me see something. No. Listen. Go ahead.
I just want to say I agree with the priest 100%. He has an obligation to tell if somebody's in danger, and that if he were to find out about somebody and he's in danger, to tell.
Good. Back with you and the audience in just a minute. All right. Let me go with this gentleman. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mort, I'm not really sure what the answer is here. If you turn around and you allow the priests to divulge what they hear in a confessional, chances are the people aren't going to go in there and confess what they're about to do. The same thing with the psychiatrist. If he's able to release it, people aren't going to go, and he's not going to be able to help them. I don't know what the answer is. You know, it's like a catch-22 situation.
It is a catch-22, and you are between, pardon me, a Rock Hudson and a hard place. But realistically, you get to a point where you say, if another individual is going to be injured, bodily injured, I think there is a responsibility to protect the whole society rather than that one individual who got his sins forgiven. You know, the hell with his sins. Let God take care of that when he gets up to the pearly gates.
You have to address the whole issue of the ability to predict.
You know, the problem is, Doctor, psychiatrists, politicians, lawyers, doctors, psychoanalysts, they study things till death, all right? And we're the ones who end up dead by the time they release their studies. We learn diddly squat.
Psychiatry that turned Mark Chapman, John Lennon, Charles Manson into lethal weapons. Lori Dan was made into a lethal weapon by psychiatrists in their treatment.
All right, let me go to this gentleman. Go ahead, pal. Ralphie!
In the Bible, one of the 10 Commandments says, "Thou not shalt kill." Thou shalt not kill.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. That was Ralphie.
I'm not a Roman Catholic, and I just want to know, if you're not from that religion, what kind of excuse is that to withhold something that could possibly kill another human being? I mean, why is just being a Roman Catholic and being in confession such a excuse?
Shouldn't be one of those, should it?
No, it's not an excuse. You walk in there with the expectation that with the vow from the priest.
Good, so you don't walk in with that expectation anymore and you're not disappointed. Go ahead, pal.
Any one of these guys with these mozzarella brains let somebody out to kill me, and I didn't know, and I found out later, and I didn't get killed. I will come out looking for you guys till I find you. I mean, it's got to be... I can't believe what I'm hearing here. And you should be fined $10 million.
What would you do after you found us, huh? What would you do after you found us?
First of all, I wouldn't tell that priest I was doing it. I wouldn't tell you. I'd just come and get you.
Yeah, and what would you do when you came and got us?
I mean, you mean you're holding information? If someone wants to hurt me, you don't think I'm going to come after you, protect my family, myself?
Hold on. You're going to come after me. I haven't done it yet, and you're going to come after me now.
If, the word was if you were to hold information that I would be hurt physically, I would definitely come looking for you.
You hadn't been hurt physically.
And I weigh 80 pounds more than you. I can do it.
So you're going to do me in for something that hasn't happened
No,
yet.
no, he's saying if it happened to him.
Wait, what's in your ear? I said that 3 times. Right? 3 times. If you were holding information that I was to be hurt and I found out from somebody else, I wouldn't stand for that. I wouldn't sit for it either.
This is fascinating because if he...
Hey, you're worried about these other guys.
If he came to me and told me he was about to do that, the question is he just angry? Is he just dramatizing?
Someone tells you that, come and tell me.
Yeah, but how would we be able to judge it?
How do you know? How are you going to know?
I say, if I find out...
You know what we do? You know what we do? We come up to a guy like this, we say, okay, let's get him out of here. All right? Get him out of here. Right now.
Comedian and actor Rich Little joins Arsenio for an evening of laughter and conversation that's bound to make a strong impression. Also, singer Ike Turner is Arsenio's very special musical guest. Tonight, all halls breaking loose. That's the Arsenio Hall Show next.